Senate Bill 184 by Senator Milkovich relative to prohibiting abortion of an unborn human being with a detectable heartbeat.
Representative Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. I am here today to present SB 184. Members, I am honored today to be able to do this bill, and it is a very solemn responsibility. The heartbeat bill protects the life of an unborn baby after his or her heartbeat can be detected, and that's around 10 to 12 weeks. There's a flyer that I passed out that's on your desk from the Department of Health and Welfare that shows exactly what I'm talking about. And it's right around 2.5 months when you can detect the baby's heartbeat with the ultrasound. And I just want to say I'm proud to stand with this legislature and the state of Louisiana because we are very pro-life. Each one of this room believes in the intrinsic value of human life. It's one of the greatest instincts that we have is the instinct for survival. And in Louisiana, we have a culture of love of life, love of family, and love of God. Nothing is more precious to any of us than the heartbeat. Our heartbeat is the most important organ that we have. And the heartbeat is the biggest indication of life that there is. When a person's heart stops beating, you know their life is ended. And when you can hear a baby's heartbeat, that is proof that life is present. Likewise, whenever that heartbeat is detected, the life is there before, but once the heartbeat is detectable, that's proof. I know nothing that's more precious than the heartbeat of a baby. And I remember hearing the heartbeat of my babies for the very first time. I was astounded, I was excited, and I was a little bit afraid because of the great responsibility that I knew that I was really pregnant. And so that responsibility it becomes very real when you hear that heartbeat. I had made it a reality for me. And the Word of God says that from the heart issues the values of life. And so I just want to talk a little bit about modern science, because modern science has revealed things that we did not know decades ago about the beginning of life. A lot of things have changed. We have so much more knowledge now. And Dr. Jaime Gordon, who is chairman of the Mayo Clinic Genetics Society, stated emphatically that life begins at conception. And Dr. Jerome Lejeune, he's a PhD and a professor at the renowned Geneticist Center at Medical College in Paris. This is what he said, and I quote, "Each of us have a very precise starting moment, which is the time at which the whole necessary and sufficient genetic information is gathered inside one cell, and that cell is the fertilized egg. There is not the slightest doubt about that, and we know that this information is written on a kind of a ribbon, which we call the DNA. Dr. Lejeune explains that the fertilized egg contains more information about the new human being that can be stored in 5 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Not five just sets, but the entire volumes in that one minute cell. Dr. Lejeune also testified before the Louisiana Legislature in the Criminal Justice Committee in 1990, and he stated, "Recent discoveries by Dr. Alex Jeffreys of England demonstrate that this information on the DNA molecule is stored on a system of minute code-type inscriptions." And it's no longer just a theory, ladies and gentlemen, of where life begins. We have leading world-renowned geneticists and scientists saying that life begins at inception. And that we are all, each one of us has a unique purpose and a destiny. And within the last few years, even I learned this, I was surprised to learn that they can tell what sex, if it's a boy or a girl, within 3 to 5 days. And that's how early that you can determine what the sex of that baby is. And so the question, I think, today is, do we value the life of an unborn baby? That we know it is an unborn baby, and do we value the life? And I think we have sent bills time after time, we've put into law time after time that we do value that. And so, members, I want to address, I know there's some challenges. I've talked with some of you that have some challenges, and I want to just talk about the challenges that a few of you have communicated to me, and I really appreciate that. When a woman faces an unwanted pregnancy or faces the challenge of becoming pregnant, she didn't plan for it. I know, as a woman, there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of anxiety, and there's confusion, uncertainty about the future. A lot of young women deal with shame. And the biggest question that's posed that she has to answer is, what am I going to do? And there's lots of caring communities, churches and services in our state that we provide solutions for them. But we'll get into this later, I think, as we talk about the bill. But one of the things that I wanted to share 20 years ago, whenever we were still living in Guadalajara, Mexico, as missionaries, my son was going to college, and he was married, and we were going to have our first grandbaby, and we were so excited. And we got a phone call down in Guadalajara, and it was my son crying so hysterically that I could not understand what he was saying. And of course, when you get a phone call like that, you know it's very serious. And what he said was, they told us that the baby has a massive tumor on the brain, and they think that we should abort her, and that if we do, if we keep the baby, she will be a vegetable at best, and if she probably won't even live. And for a moment, because we were so excited about having our first grandbaby, and I just said, whatever it is, we'll deal with it, but we can't abort her, and we will deal with whatever comes. And we did. And so 6 months later, we had a beautiful baby girl that was perfectly normal, and outstanding athlete. And so that just shows you that, you know, we had to face a very hard choice. And I know that the governor has faced a similar choice. And the choice is, how much do we value life? Our governor values life, and I know everyone in this room values life. Whether it's a perfect life or it's not a perfect life, we each have an intrinsic value of life. And so I think life is always worth saving. None of us would hesitate to save the life if we knew that someone else was being harmed. Let's say a child next door, or in a restaurant, you saw someone harming a child. You would not hesitate to step in, whether you would do it or you would call the police. We would not hesitate to step in to save the life of that child. And so as a pastor, I'm communicating what I believe is the heart of God and what is right. And John Adams said that the Constitution was written for a moral society. He said it is wholly inadequate to govern any other. And even though I know that there are horrible crimes that are committed with rape and incest, I really can't think of anything that's worse than that, because we do live in a fallen world. The child should not be killed and terminated because of the crime of the father. That child, because of what I shared with Dr. Lejeune, and it was astounding to me to see that ribbon of that DNA that determines the sex, the eye color, the height, all of that is already in there at conception. And so even though there are horrible crimes that could be perpetrated on a woman, that life still has intrinsic value. We never punish others. We never punish others for the crime of someone else. And so the heart is the most important organ that we possess. The heartbeat in a baby can be detected somewhere around 10 weeks old, 10 to 12 weeks old. Did y'all get the flyer that shows that? And the sad part of that is that with many abortions, the heartbeat is stopped during that abortion, obviously. Through no choice of their own, that baby's life is terminated. And I believe this legislature believes, that it's an injustice and it's a human rights violation in our nation. And this bill would stop the practice of aborting babies when there is a detectable heartbeat. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will answer any questions.
For a question, Representative Emerson.
Speaker. Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hodges, did you know that, according to a survey done by Pew, that well over a majority of Louisianians believe that we should not allow abortion in Louisiana?
Yes, Representative, I know that.
And that Louisiana is consistently ranked in the top 5 most pro-life states in America?
I didn't know that we're among the top 5, but I'm proud to stand in that number.
Of course. And finally, did you know the governor said that if this bill reaches his desk, he'll sign it? I
did know that.
And
I'm very grateful for that.
while Governor Edwards and I disagree on a lot of things, you know, I'm proud that he stands for life.
Absolutely. I am proud that he stands for life, and the evidence is in his family and in his actions over the past few years, and so I totally applaud him for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Emerson.
For a question, Representative Horton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Hodges, for your bravery. I said to us it's a no-brainer, but to some who just don't get how much Louisiana does value life and our citizens, let me ask you, does this bill, is it trying to tell a woman what she can or cannot do with her body?
Well, I believe in a woman's choice. I believe in our freedom of choice, especially here in America. We live in we celebrate freedom in America. But I believe that my choice ends when another life begins, and my choice cannot be forced upon another's life, to end another's life in any situation.
Well, did you know that I totally agree with you? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great bill.
Thank you, Representative Horton. Yeah, that's motherhood is like that. We there's choices that we make. Like I said, when I was carrying my babies, and the overwhelming responsibility that's there. But that is just what comes with motherhood. And either way, it's a blessing.
For a question, Representative Amity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hodges, I see on page 3 that there's an exception listed that says performed when the pregnancy is diagnosed as medically futile. Can you explain what that is and where you stand on that?
Well, I think there's an amendment on that. I know that one of the representatives, Representative Cruz, I think, said he had an amendment that was going to deal with that. But when a pregnancy is futile, would be when the baby was dead in the womb, or there was no chance of viability, such as in the case when they told my son and daughter-in-law that Valerie was she was not going to be able to live. So that would be the medical futility. Thank God in our case we did not go with that route, but I believe that this bill makes exception for that.
And so would you say that an ectopic pregnancy would be an example of medically futile?
Yes, absolutely. An ectopic pregnancy would be an example of that. And in that case, she could have the procedure done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We do have a number of questions. We do have a number of amendments. If we could proceed to the amendments now, there's quite a few of them. Let's go ahead with the amendments, Madam Clerk.
First amendment is a set of amendments by Representative James, set number 3332.
Representative James, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. Members, thank you for your attention on this issue, and I know that it's one that's very personal to everyone in this body. And I too commend Representative Hodges on carrying the bill and following her convictions. And my convictions led me to the amendment that's before us in this body. I'm very familiar with the story, the governor's story and his family, and now I'm familiar with the story of Representative Hodges. And one thing that was very consistent in both of those stories is the fact that they had a conversation as a family, and they made a choice. And many of you seen my little girl. Julie hears me FaceTime her all the time, and I remember the first ultrasound, and I saw nothing. We were too early. I didn't see anything, and I said I thought she was pregnant. And the technician was like, "What? You see that little twinkle? That's your baby." And I know I felt the same pride, even though I didn't have to carry the baby, as she felt, and all you mothers felt. But that baby was conceived in love. And this amendment is for those women who unfortunately have been raped or incest. And that's a decision just like Representative Hodges and her family made, and just like the governor, his wife made. That's a family decision. That's not a decision for us. We are not that important to make that decision for a woman who's been raped. And I know that there are many families that will adopt. There are safe haven. I know all that. However, I am not man enough to tell a woman who's had her insides ripped apart and been raped. I'm not man enough to tell that woman, you know what? Live with it. Every kick, every bout of morning sickness, every headache, a reminder of that trauma. I'm not man enough to do that. I can't make that decision for a woman. And I know what's going to happen with this, and I know the belief of the people of our great state. But this is common sense. We cannot force a woman to live with that trauma. I'm not man enough to do that. And members, we hear all these stories. I know people that have been raped. I know someone who's been raped. And I know the trauma that she lives with every single day. Loud music. Men that look like the man that raped her. I'm not man enough to force a woman who has been raped to live with it and look at that every single day for 9 months. I'm not man enough to do it. And members, I think that this is a very sensible and humane amendment to this bill, and I ask that you support it.
For a question on the amendment, Representative Amity. He's
Thank you,
waiving.
Mr. Speaker.
The author of the amendment is waiving questions, Representative Amity. For the floor on the amendment, Representative Seabaugh.
Members, I rise in opposition to this amendment. We don't punish children in this country for the sins of their fathers. The manner in which a baby is conceived is not an indictment of that child that should warrant a death sentence for that child. And that's as simple as I can put it. Look, if you want to bring legislation allowing the mother, the victim of rape, to choose to execute the rapist, I'm on board. I think that's a good amendment. That's a good bill. But this is not. Because in this situation, what you're doing is you're talking about a child. This is a child. The manner in which the child was conceived does not affect that child. That child is capable of hopes and dreams, and that child has a future right up until that moment. And if we can prevent that, I think we should. And we have before us a bill that will allow us to prevent that. And look, I'm not standing up here trying to condone rape or incest. Again, if we could pass a bill that would allow us to let the mother choose, if you want choice, let her choose to execute the rapist. That's fine. I'm for that. I'm not for this bill, and I would ask you please join me in opposing this bill, this amendment rather. Thank you.
Representative Miller, is your question for Representative Seabaugh? He waives. For the floor on the bill, Representative Marcel. On the amendment, I'm sorry. For the floor on the amendment, Representative Marcel.
Thank you, members. I could not have said it any better than Representative James. I don't know how we could sit here and think that we could make judgment on someone who has been violently raped or incest, and not only require that they have that baby, but require that they raise that baby, that they look in the face of the baby that is a part of the person who violated them. You know, it's amazing that we we come to this well and we say that we'll go ahead and we'll execute the person that did the rape, that means that we must not be pro-life all the way from the womb to the tomb. Because if you want to save a life, then what's the point here if you can take another life later? I say that I was going to add this amendment when I found out that Representative James had the same identical amendment. I just joined him in echoing his amendment. It should be unconscionable for us to sit here and dictate what happens with a woman's body. How many times have you been pregnant or raped? I think we need to sit back and take a hard look at what we're doing and what we're trying to legislate. It's absolutely incredible to me. I'm standing for the women in Louisiana who have been raped. Those that may not have a voice here today, I'm standing for them. Because they should have a voice. And they should make the decision, not us. I have 2 children. I had a child when I was a teenager. I made the decision to have the child. Me and my family made that decision. I have 8 grandchildren and 5 great-grands. We made the decision. We made it. So when we make these decisions to have children, and when we force people to make decisions to have children, it's 2 different outcomes. Because somebody has to take care of them after they're here. So I rise in support of this amendment.
The floor and the amendment, Representative Ivy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise in opposition to this amendment with all due respect to my colleague and the motivations behind this amendment, and also, the outcome of this, the vote on this amendment. I respect that this is as about a touchy subject as you can get. And we all have different beliefs on surrounding this, and I respect those beliefs. Some of these beliefs are steeped in our faith and what we believe to be life. And I want to distinguish something that's and it's been a part of this narrative on the abortion issue for as long as I can remember. And to me, with regard to it's the woman's body, and look, it absolutely is the woman's body. I think most of us probably know someone personally, family, with the statistics that show a high percentage of women are sexually assaulted in their life. I think we all know someone who's close to us that we love who's been a victim of these types of traumas. That said, for me personally, it's about life and in my faith and what I believe when life begins. And that's a debatable issue even amongst pro-life people, right? When should, and for me it gets down to this, when do the protections of the United States Constitution go into effect, right? For me, medically speaking, death is determined by, if you don't have a heartbeat, things like that. But ultimately, if someone's on, ventilators and other types of machinery, if there's no brain activity, right? And so there are things that determine at a very, very early stage in pregnancy, right, where there are all of the signs of life. And so for me, it's about affording the protections of the Constitution to life. It's not about, and again, with absolute respect and regard for the victim and the trauma they've suffered, and as my colleague, Representative James said, that they live with that forever. This is a scar on them. Sometimes people don't heal from it. Some of them do, and they go on to make a big difference in the world. But some people just don't heal from it because of that trauma. So with great respect and care, okay, I want to commit to y'all if I'm reelected next term, that, you know what, and we say we want to protect life, we want to be pro-life. What I want to commit to do is this. Next term, what we need to do is, and of course a lot of this hinges on if Roe v. Wade is overturned and all that, but what we need to do is we need to create programs and where we put the support of the state of Louisiana in the form of funding and other programs to get where all the counseling, all the other any type of support that the victims of these situations need, that we create that support structure. So we don't just say we're pro-life and then we leave them in a very traumatic situation just to figure it out for themselves. So my commitment is to bring in a support structure, particularly for this specific set of victims and who would have to, go through this process to have a child. And so that's my commitment, but I can't support the amendment because I believe life begins at conception and should be protected. So with all due respect to the topic and all of y'all who believe differently, I just wanted to distinguish myself and my vote from other people who may not have taken as much care to show some respect to the victims. Thank you.
For the floor on the amendment, Representative Amity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the amendment also. I kind of like the ideas that Representative Seabaugh was sharing. Might be topics for a bill in the future. I wanted to say that I don't mean to diminish anything that a woman who's experienced rape has been through. It's a horrible, violent crime. It's a trauma. I think what some people forget, though, is that abortion is also a trauma, not only to the baby who never survives, except in rare occasions, but to the mother who has to live with the memory. It takes a lot more than 9 months to recover from rape. It takes a lifetime. It takes a lot more than 9 months to recover after an abortion. It also takes a lifetime. I don't stand in judgment of the mothers who have been victims. I counsel those mothers to not see the baby as anything but also a victim of the rape. I counsel the mothers to remember that although this is nothing you wanted, it has happened, and that baby that you're carrying gets half of its DNA from you. So see that baby as a victim along with you, and at least give birth to that baby if you're able to carry it to term, and let someone else raise it if you believe that you might mistreat it somehow, or you might begrudge the baby for the sins of the father, because there are so many people who cannot have a baby of their own. So give the baby a chance. I want you to remember that having an abortion doesn't mean that you are no longer a mother. It means that now you're the mother of a deceased baby. That's why it takes a lifetime to recover, if you ever do. I'd also like to remind you that, unfortunately, in our day and time, abortion facilities hide the sexual exploitation of young girls and young women. It gives an easy out to those men in our society who rape or traffic vulnerable young girls and women. These men use abortion to hide their crimes or to put trafficked girls back into business more quickly. Abortion only facilitates the continued cycle of sexual exploitation of these young girls. It just creates more and more victims. That's why I oppose this amendment. I
I waive questions.
For the floor on the amendment, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was actually going to save these comments for my own amendment, but I think it really is appropriate to say what I have here. Continually hearing conversations about a woman who's been raped, a woman who has been a victim of incest. Many of you sitting in this room have a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 12-year-old. Those individuals have been victims of rape and incest and have had pregnancies. And yet, you choose to say to a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 12-year-old that they are supposed to have a baby by a relative that they live with every single day. So you sit here in judgment of women, you say. The conversation has all been on women. But what about children? What about the children who suffer the same kinds of things that you just heard about? How do you protect them? You're not protecting them. You're not allowing those families to make decisions for a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, or a 12-year-old. Because it happens every single day in the state of Louisiana and across this country that they're having babies. Those babies become dependent upon the state. Those babies have low mortality rates, dependent upon the state. Folks, you can't continue to dismiss the fact that without the exception in this bill, what you're saying to our babies, that they are supposed to have a baby and continue to have a baby if this is not put on this bill. How dare you tell a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, or 12-year-old that they're supposed to carry a baby for an uncle, a father, a nephew, or someone in their family that's taking advantage of them? How dare you? How dare you not allow a family to make a decision for that child who's carrying a child? Preventing pregnancy is much more important because preventing pregnancy is pro-life. You're interested in pro-birth, but you're not interested in what happens to that child after they're born, and you're not interested in the baby that's having the baby. I rise in support of this amendment going on for the children who have babies.
There are no other members to speak. Representative James, to close on your amendment.
Members, look, I don't judge any of you, no matter how you vote on this. And this is
Mr. Representative Glover, why do you rise? No, well, your light is pressed for the floor on the bill, Representative Moore. We were on the amendment. We'll come back to the bill after the amendments. You wanted to speak on the amendment? Representative James. Representative Moore for the floor on the amendment.
To my colleagues, I was not going to say anything about this, but maybe a few of you all know it. But 61 years ago, my mother, at the age of just 14, gave birth to me. Now, she's been deceased for 22 years. And I sit there and I was told that a legislator is not supposed to shed tears, but I'm finding out you do that, especially in the Health and Welfare Committee. You do this a lot. But I just wanted to share this with you. Back in 1958, regardless, It was just, you did not bring a child out of wedlock. And this was not my mother's intent. And the father told my mother when she told him that she was pregnant, just have an abortion. And what I was told, it was really just devastating. And she was 14, and I have a granddaughter that's 14. And recently, especially since I've been down here and hearing about this, I look at her and I pray to God nothing ever happens to her, that she would end up pregnant like this. But to make a long story short, my mother went ahead and brought me in this world. And she could not take care of me because her little body was so little. But she gave me to my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother took care of me. She was born on a plantation, so I only knew what she could teach me. But I'm standing in front of you all. And the thing about it is I understand this bill. And I hate to think that if you were raped or incest, which my mother did not consent to this, that she had to go ahead and give birth to me. But I do know this, for a long period of time, as a little child, and because I could see my biological mother, I used to look in her eyes and think she hated my guts. And for a long time, I thought that until she told me she loved me. But her life was upside down. She didn't get a chance to do any of the things that she wanted to. And people just totally thought she was a bad person. Even the people in my family and even the church that she went to, they distanced themselves from her. So she went through something. But she went ahead and brought me in this world. And right before she died, she was in a deep coma, so the doctor told us to go ahead and say our goodbyes. And the only thing I could tell her was that I was so glad that she allowed me to come into this world. And I don't know if she heard me, but I believe she did, because one little tear came down her cheek. So I don't know how to feel about this bill. I just know that it's not easy. It's not easy if somebody's been raped. But there was a choice. She gave me up. And I'm here in front of you all, and I'm trying to figure out why the Lord has let me come this far. But I just wanted to share that with you. And regardless of what decision you vote on, just search your heart, because it's hard for me to even compromise. I'm on both sides. But I think I will go ahead and vote against the amendment simply because I know she brought me in this world. But then some cannot do what she did. And I can tell you it wasn't easy.
Representative James, to continue with your close.
Representative Moore, your courage that you just displayed is commendable, and I'm honored to be your colleague. I'm honored that you had the courage to share that story, because not many have the courage to do what you just did. And members, the word that I keep hearing from everybody is, it starts with a C and ends with an E. Choice. And when I stood here, I told you, this rape and incest, Ted James does not believe that it is a decision for the legislature. If something happens to my child, to your child, that's a decision for Ted, Veronica, and Harper. That's a family conversation. I'm not questioning your faith. I'm not judging you. My comments are mine. I don't believe, and I couldn't, in good conscience, not attempt to put this amendment on this bill. Because I don't think, and it's great, we rank number 5 in anti-abortion. That's awesome. What we rank in education? Like, let's be as intentional on chasing to the top in other areas like we are in this area. Let's be attentive. Let's be passionate to move us to the top of some other rankings. I do believe, with all of what we've heard, the personal stories, the stories that we haven't been through, the stories that we read about, that we hear about. I don't think that a decision for a woman who's been raped or who has been a victim of rape and incest is a decision for us. I think that's a family decision, and I ask that you support this amendment.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Representative Hodges, on your objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. Thank you, Representative Moore, too, in fighting back tears just to hear your story, because I know that does take.
Representative Hodges, just a minute. We did recognize Representative Sebah's objection from the beginning, so we'll go to the vote on the amendment at this time. Sorry about that. Representative James has offered an amendment to which Representative Sebah has objected. When the clerk opens the machines, all those in favor of the amendment vote yes. All those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Vote your machines, members. Representative Horton, no. Representative Amade, no. Are you through voting? Are you through voting? Clerk will close the machine. 35 yeas, 67 nays, and the amendment fails to be adopted. Next amendment, Madam Clerk.
Next amendment is by Representative Smith, one-page set of amendments, 3322 on your computers, members.
Representative Smith, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I said a lot of what I wanted to say earlier, but I want to tell you about why I'm asking for this amendment to be put on the bill, and it's for sex education. The first time that sex education came to the floor was during my first term, and I talked about those 9, 10, 11, and 12-year-olds who were pregnant or who had a baby. And one of the representatives sitting right in this aisle here stood up and asked the question about the age that I was speaking of. And his comments were, there's just no way that that's happening. That had to be a one-time thing. And I then asked him, in my own mind and in my own way, what world was he living in? Because it wasn't the same world that many of us live in. There are actually young people who are out here who have no idea about sex education, who have no idea about what's happening to their bodies. And teaching the concepts of appropriate touching at appropriate age levels is very, very important so that they can understand what's happening, stop what's happening, and to tell someone what's happening. The bill, as you have it, without that exception that you just voted down, to me says that each of you do approve of babies having babies, with the majority of them becoming dependent on the state. Preventing pregnancy is pro-life. You can't just be pro-birth, leaving the remainder of that baby's life to whatever happens. Often it will be continuing the cycle of poverty in those families, and we know that education is the key to stopping poverty. And even sex education can save a life. And I ask for your approval of the amendment to have sex education taught in our schools, and I will take no questions.
Representative Miguez, why do you rise?
Hello. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to know if this amendment is germane to the bill.
Just a minute. Representative Miguez, the bill, as you can read in the title, is related to abortion and matters dealing with it. The amendment directs a new subject matter of sex education. It is not germane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next amendment, Madam Clerk.
Next amendment is a set of amendments by Representative Billiot, number 3425, a 3-page set of amendments.
Representative Billiot on your amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, Ms. Clerk. Just a few days ago, we had some individuals who came over to the Capitol and they stood along that railing. And they started talking to us about raising their loved ones and how they had to really, some of them had to sell their homes, sell their cars. Parent had to leave their work and go ahead and stay at home so they could raise the child. Just couldn't afford it. Just got to the point to where some of them just could not afford it anymore. And it's known as TEFA. We voted on that bill that day. And the vote came out 98 to nothing. 98 yeas, no nays. After we passed that bill, I started thinking about the bills that were going to come up about abortion and the other situations about life. And so while I was thinking about that, I started thinking about that person when they was going to go and have their ultrasound done and is going to determine the baby's health, well-being, intelligence, physical condition, and all those things that go along with the pregnancy at the very beginning. And how those families must feel at the time when they hear something that's not a positive sign. But they're going to have that child. They're going to move forward in having that child. Because not only because it's a gift, but because it's part of the law that we have. So I felt that putting those two together, I feel that we should be able to offer those individuals the TEFA program that that's in place and that will follow this abortion bill as it goes. We all know that this bill today will not become law unless Mississippi decides, their court system decides that it's constitutional, then ours, if we pass it, becomes law. So we still got a ways to go before such a time that it's all ruled. And if there's any more adjustments that's got to be made, probably next legislative session, people are going to come up and do things also. So my amendment's been posted, and there was one change in it on line 17 of the first page. Representative Amity brought it to our attention that it says may be instead of will be eligible. May be. So, Mr. Speaker.
For a question on the amendment, Representative Stefanski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Representative, you're adding the TEFRA option that we voted out of here 98 to nothing?
Yes.
Onto this bill?
Yes.
I think you have a good amendment.
And
Thank you,
then
Mr. Speaker.
The other thing I want to make, and I know I should stop while I'm ahead, but, you know, this is a long process, and people are going to be thinking about different things as we go. So I want those people who are making those judgment calls and those things now to know that the state not only requires but stands by them in their decision that they make.
For a question on the amendment, Representative Henry.
Representative Billiot, I don't know whether you're aware that the funding for TEFRA that we voted out of here 100 to 1 was removed a couple days ago. The $5 million was removed on the other side. I just want to make you aware of that. I seem to be fine with the amendment. Seems to be fine. I just want you to be aware that as we move through the budget process, we will be working to try to restore that $5 million that I believe it was Representative Horton and Representative Miller's bill that did that, if I remember correctly. Did you know?
Okay, I'm aware of that. Thank you very much. There's some things that happen on the Senate side will be happening according to.
For a question on the amendment, Representative Jackson.
Mr. Billiard, so this is one of those amendments, Representative Billiard, that we're asking you to choose life, but we're making sure that the child is taken care of once you choose life. Am I correct?
Correct.
I like your amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank Representative Miller and Representative Doty for coming up with that bill. It brought a lot of light to a lot of things that are going on.
For a question on the amendment, Representative Seabaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not sure I'm against the amendment, but I did want to question the germaneness.
Just a minute. Representative Seabaugh, very similar to the prior amendment. We're dealing with abortion and definitions accordingly. This introduces a new TEFRA program with eligibility requirements and requirements for funded health care services. It will not be germane.
Okay. Thank you.
Next amendment, Madam Clerk.
A set of amendments by Representative Bagneris, number 3414, a one-page set of amendments.
Representative Bagneris, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Can you hear me now? Because you need to listen. I think Representative Smith hit on my part of my amendment that I encouraged a lot. A 12-year-old, a 10-year-old who's raped and has to take care of a baby. Y'all don't want to fund early childhood education, but y'all want to let a child, somebody's child, have a child. Then when they're brought up in poverty, y'all want to put them in jail to make some more money. Let's get real. Where's the common sense in this house? There's no common sense in common, right? Y'all have to live with a woman's choice. That's not a kid's choice. In my amendment, in line D, it says, in case in which a woman invokes her constitutional right to choose the abortion procedure. Constitution. Y'all are always talking about Constitution. It is her right. It is her body. You cannot and you must not try to legislate morality. All you so-called Bible thumpers in here who supposedly preach the book, y'all just talk the words, y'all don't walk the walk, but y'all want to talk the talk. The Bible says y'all should not do what I do. Look it up.
There are no questions on the amendment. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Representative Hodges, on your objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. I just want to first of all say that I have tremendous respect for each one of you, whether you're on whichever side you're on this. I respect you, and I think it's a debate that we can have respectfully. And basically what I think that amendment did, I was just looking at it as you came up here, I didn't see it before, it really kind of guts the bill, I think. And while we have tremendous empathy for women of whatever age, especially for children that have been the victims of rape or incest, and it is a heinous crime, as I said earlier, but if anyone should be put to death, it should be the perpetrator of the crime, not the child, not the baby. And one of the things that Representative Amade said, that abortion, and I know this for a fact, abortion compounds the trauma of rape and incest. I know people, having been a pastor for 35 years, I know people who have went through this, both. And abortion does not take away the trauma of that. It keeps it going, because not only have they been traumatized once, they've been traumatized twice. And the sadness, the anxiety of the depression lasts for decades. And I know I have very close friends who had abortions back in the 70s, and they were never able to have children because of that. The further along in a pregnancy you go, the more chance it is to harming the mother, the reproductive organs, that they can never have a child. Another issue about incest that I think we need to consider, that when whether it's rape or incest, a crime has been committed. And by that person taking that child or that woman to an abortion clinic and having an abortion, they can continue to do that. Human traffickers do that. We know that. That's what they're doing. That's how they cover their tracks, because there's no way to track that they can keep perpetrating that crime on the same victim over and over. And so I think we need to think about that. One of the things I do want to point out that I think this body needs to understand, this bill deals with a detectable heartbeat, which is around 10 to 12 weeks. Up until then, if there's been a case of rape or incest, and by week 5, you know, or week 6 or 7, you certainly know if you're pregnant or not. And this bill does not make any prohibition against a person having an abortion up to around 10 or 12 weeks. They can still have that abortion if they were a victim of rape and incest. So we're not stopping that. This is just after a detectable heartbeat is there, around 12 weeks, 10 to 12 weeks. So I object to the amendment because I believe it basically just, it's a bad amendment. So I ask you to oppose the amendment.
Representative Jefferson, is your question for Representative Hodges? Representative Jefferson, is your question for Representative Hodges?
Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, thank you. I understand, Representative Hodges, what you indicated as it relates to rape and incest. But my question is, as it relates to the life of the mother. If, looking at his amendment, in some part of it is saying if there would be substantial harm or the risk of death. What's your
I believe
feeling?
that is in a part of the bill, and I know as once Representative Cruz comes down, he has an amendment that's going to deal with that part, but there is in the bill right now an exception for the life of the mother.
And I thought so. That's why I wanted a little clarity as it relates to Representative Vigneris, and so it was probably for him, Mr. Speaker, because he indicated various things, but I wanted some clarity as it relates to the life of the mother, any substantial harm.
And that's at whatever point in the pregnancy. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Jones, is your question for Representative Hodges?
I think she just answered it.
Thank you. There are no other questions. Representative Bagnaris, to close on your amendment.
Representative Hodges has brought up a point that I think we need to belabor. When a 9, 10, 12-year-old is pregnant, they don't find out in 10 weeks. They walk around with big sweatshirts on, trying to hide it from their parents if it was rape or incest. So you don't know until they're 5 or 6 months pregnant when you see that bump that they might have been raped, and then you start to question them. It's too late to have an abortion, as you would put in this bill. The bill is common sense. Please, can legislate morality. Let the families make their decision and not us. It's not for us to do. As Representative James has said, we need to let the family get together and take care of their business. not us.
Representative Bagneris has offered an amendment to which Representative Hodges has objected. When the clerk opens the machines, all those in favor of the amendment vote yes. Those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Vote your machines, members. Representative Horton, no. Representative Hodges, no. Representative Amity, no. Are you through voting? Representative White, no. Are you through voting? Clerk will close the machine. 24 yeas, 76 nays. The amendment fails to be adopted. Next amendment, Madam Clerk.
Next set of amendments is by Representative Cruz, one-page set of amendments, 3428 on your computers.
Representative Cruz on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, while I don't think this bill is perfect in any way, I think it does advance the cause for the state of Louisiana and for the unborn. But I did want to clarify some language in it. After reading it, I wanted to make it clear that we want physicians in those cases where the life of the mother is at risk to try to preserve both lives. I personally am not aware of any times where an abortion was necessary to save the life of the mother, but I want to make it clear, try to save both. I just think that's common sense. So that's the first part, Amendment 1, and it also has it eliminated a paragraph right after that I was told by staff is already in the law that doesn't need to be repeated, and it talks about written documentation. So that's just actually a technical part. And the second part does attempt to better define what medically futile means. In those cases when it's a high degree of certainty that the baby will not make it to term, and the mother's going to, I guess, live with that the dread and the knowledge that the baby won't make it, that it's just clearly better spelled out how we're going to diagnose that and determine that. And the key part about it is we don't really want someone from an outpatient abortion clinic advising the mother on this. We want a doctor outside of that environment. So that's all that the Second Amendment does.
For a question on the amendment, Representative Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Cruz, for trying to provide a little clarity or an enlightenment on this particular area, because it's definitely an area that I'm concerned about as it relates to the mother's health, did you know? But my question to you is, in the first part of your amendment, how does the Hippocratic Oath come into play as it relates to doctors, and what is the standard? Do you have any indication as far as what that reasonableness might
Well,
mean?
I just wanted to make clear, it says in the sentence here, the physician shall make reasonable medical efforts to preserve both the life of the mother and the child. So reasonable efforts means if it seems unreasonable and can't do both, well, then he or she's going to have to make a decision. But I just want to make it clear that, hey, try to do your best to save both.
Okay. But wouldn't you think that most physicians at this point are already exercising their practice under that particular?
I certainly would hope so.
Okay. And because, as you know, it could possibly be an instantaneous second. Things happen so quickly. So I was just trying to get a little clarity as far as that reasonable efforts per se.
Yeah, this doesn't restrict that. All it does is just trying to express the will of the legislature and the people that, hey, we want you to do the best you can to save both.
Okay. And we know that a lot of legislators have, attempted this. Does this, your amendment, model itself after any other legislature, or is it something you just
It models
came up
itself a little bit after the Mississippi law that passed.
Okay.
So just trying to follow more what's already out there.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Cruz.
Thank you.
For a question on the amendment, Representative Marcel.
Representative Cruz.
Yes, ma'am.
You say that your amendment is going to assist the mother, and help me understand how that is. Are we not dealing with doctors who already know the rules, who are already trying to save the mother in cases where there's an emergency? I thought that was already a part of something that they do under the medical laws that they follow.
It certainly should be. This is just, the people have made it clear what they support, and we're just trying to make our intent known to them a little more clearly.
And so when you put an amendment on a bill that gives us a definition of medical futile. What is the intent there? I think we can all Google it.
That's actually a copy, and it cites the statute there, 40/2175-3.
But the question is, why is it necessary that you give us a definition of what it is? And I guess you answered it a little earlier. Did you say that we were mimicking Mississippi?
Believe it or not, yes.
Oh, I would like not to believe it. Did you know?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that definition is already in the bill. I'm just trying to make it clear.
Correct, but a lot of definitions are, did you know, in bills, and we don't go around putting amendments on bills just to define a term. And I just don't see the necessity in you giving us a definition, because we all have Google.
Okay, I
Did you
appreciate
know?
that.
And so-
Oftentimes in law,
I mean, unless you just want the people to think that you're assisting them.
in
The women?
in all the legislation we pass, we often define terms that people should know, but we make it more clear.
Typically, that's the author. And when you have a word like medical futile, we just kind of look it up and figure out what it means. But if you want the people to know in Louisiana that you're assisting them, if this is an attempt to do so, I think it's a failed attempt. Did you know?
Thank you.
For a question on the amendment, Representative Jones.
Representative, are you saying by virtue of the, let me go to Amendment 2 part first.
Okay.
You're taking out the definition of medically futile, which I've talked to some of the learned lawyers in here. That term is not even mentioned anywhere else in the bill, yet we're defining it. So you're taking that out of
No, sir.
the bill?
This
Well,
just
let me finish my
modifies
question. You're taking it out of the bill because it's covered in Section 2A, I think, where the threat of life to the mother is defined?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. Medically futile Amendment 2 just changes the definition, modifies it a little bit. It doesn't take it out.
Okay, tell me how it modifies it.
It cites Statute 40/2173. It talks about not having an outpatient abortion facility doctor give the diagnosis and the judgment there. I mean, that's basically all it does. It takes the existing definition and adds a citation to another law and says, hey, we don't want the advice coming from an outpatient abortion facility physician.
So you have to get so what you're saying, there has to be a different physician to make that decision?
No, not at all.
I mean, a physician is a physician. What if that, I don't know this, but what if that physician has a private practice somewhere else? Are they not a doctor?
I'm not sure what you're saying here. What we don't want
I'm
is
not
someone,
sure what you're saying.
I'm not sure what you're asking. What I'm trying to say is someone that advocates for abortion, we don't think should be the person advising someone on a bill that's trying to limit abortion. We're trying to emphasize the value of life. So someone from the side that's really trying to remove life and stop it early would not be an appropriate person to advise a person in a situation like this.
Is anything that you're trying to do in this amendment water down the woman's protection from saving her own life?
No, I don't believe so at all.
Are you sure? That wasn't
Yeah.
very convincing. No.
Yeah, I'm sure. My objective is to save the woman and the child.
Okay. On the first part, yeah, you got me messed up with the second answer because on the first part, I don't see any penalties. Have you applied any penalties in your amendment?
No.
Thank you very much.
For a question on the amendment, Representative Cox.
My question is real simple. Who gets priority? The mother or the baby?
Both do. That's the whole idea
No,
behind this.
there's times that listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. There's times when there is a choice to be made. And I would like to know where in your bill it says that who gets priority.
My amendment doesn't say that.
So
It says try to
basically,
save both.
trying to save both can die.
That's true. That's
But
why
see-
we have physicians like you supposed
See,
to
I'm
say
all for the
everything.
bill, man, but what I'm having problems now is did you know, what you're saying is, beforehand, if that doctor said that it was the life of the mother was in stake, then the choice was made. And I agree, if they can save them, of course, that's okay. But if it comes to the point where I have to choose between my wife, I'm here to tell you that the choice is going to be my wife. Now, that's what I was sitting here and I had to think about it like that, did you know? So, and I don't see that in what you're saying there. You complicated things, in my opinion. But who am I? I'm just an old country boy from North Louisiana.
Representative Cox, this assigns no priority whatsoever. It just makes clear
I know,
that
but
both lives are valuable.
But now you're saying that it's just I got to go try to save both. We've just had some stuff that happened, and
Like was mentioned, that's part of the Hippocratic Oath, is try to save all life.
and that's true. But I'm just asking. I thought beforehand until you brought this that if it was determined that then it was the life of the mother, and now that's what I'm saying is making it complicated for me, because I know in a split second both lives could be lost. On a split second, one life can be saved. So I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For a question on the amendment, Representative Robert Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Cruz, and I don't know if you've talked to them or not, but the doctors, I guess, in the Louisiana State Medical Society are opposed to this bill. I'm wondering if you're bringing this amendment because that will withdraw their opposition. I don't know if you've talked to them or not.
I have heard they're actually in support of it in this form.
Oh, their website says that they're opposed to this bill, but this would alleviate that, is what you're telling me?
That's what I understand, but I'm not.
Do you know who you talked to over there so I could verify that?
No. I didn't personally speak to them.
You didn't? Do you know who did?
Well, I can't call them for testimony, but I believe the Louisiana Right to Life and the Family Forum, all that are parties to that.
I'll check with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
For a question on the amendment, Representative Ivy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Cruz, I'm trying to follow the necessity of this amendment in that we're deleting 21 lines of a bill and you're replacing them with fewer words. And the nature of your First Amendment, it changes significantly the content and context of what you're leading. They're not the same. One requires written documentation and a lot of things in writing, and then what you replace it with is just the medical efforts that a physician needs to do. So
that actually wasn't part of anything I suggested. Staff, when reviewing this, thought, hey, we don't need that part in there. And I said, okay, fine. I mean, the point I wanted to emphasize is both lives are valuable. That's all I was looking to get out of that.
Okay, because again, so the problem that I have at this point is that a bill that's been thoroughly vetted, I'm assuming from the Senate all the way to the House floor, you're deleting a substantial amount of the language, and I think could really change it without a real thorough vetting of that. Did you know? Would you be okay with removing the deletion and adding your paragraph as a separate? And if you have a good explanation for it, I'm all ears.
I'm not, but at this point, since it seems to be confusing people, I'm willing to withdraw the amendment. It was very common sense, but I didn't mean to confuse anybody.
Well, I mean, you were deleting a lot of stuff that I think is nice to have in there. The written, documentation. You strip all that out.
If I had that in there, would the rest of it be fine to you? Because
I would not have as much concern.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you. So if you withdraw, we can maybe work on it.
The gentleman withdraw the amendment. Next amendment, Madam Clerk.
Next set of amendments is by Representative Stokes, one-page set of amendments, 3416.
Representative Stokes on your amendment.
Well, first of all, Representative Cruz is very tall. My goodness. Can I go now?
Yes.
Okay. I come to you with this amendment today as a very serious pro-life advocate. Life is so precious, and it's so precious to me. And I look at my own 2 children, and I thank God every day for them. There was a handout that came to your desks earlier that stated that it would be closer to 10 weeks when a heartbeat would be detectable. But on a Google search, it looks more like 6. I mean, everywhere I look, in every site I can find, I think by 10 weeks it should certainly be there, but you very viably could have one as early as 6. Now, at 6 weeks pregnant, you've been pregnant for 4 weeks. You might have known for 1 or 2 weeks that you're pregnant. Might. Pat Moore, Representative Moore, your story really hit home for me because I have a family member that recently was reunited with a daughter that she had been a victim of rape, and she gave her daughter up for adoption, and that daughter and her have reunited now, and it's been a beautiful, wonderful thing. And so I get that. I love that. It makes me so happy to see them united. None of us even knew that it had ever happened. So it was just a shock to the whole family, but a beautiful, wonderful shock. But I can't pretend that I can foresee every gruesome possibility that could happen to somebody. I just can't. And as much as I honor and I just truly believe in what I do here as a pro-life legislator, I'm 100% pro-life. I've always been 100% pro-life, but I don't feel equipped to make every victim's decision. I don't. I want to, because I know that the smartest thing right now, I know what it is. So it pains me, and I've been sitting here in a lot of pain because I want very badly to be able to just roll with this one, but I can't do it because I can't know everybody's situation and their pain. I can't know it. So I stand before you and just ask that you consider this amendment that would allow a victim 10 weeks. So that's really only 6 weeks or so after they know that they're pregnant, and it could just be 5, but for them to come to a decision with their family. If the bill, if you just make an exception for rape and incest, our state statutes, I believe, are that you can have an abortion up to 20 weeks. And so I'm bringing that all the way back down to 10, and 10 is what we believe might be the time for a heartbeat anyway, according to this handout. So I also want to note, and I'm very nervous about this, I'm sorry, I'm a little shaky, But, you know, I'm looking at tweets from our president. And our president said that he is strongly pro-life with 3 exceptions: rape, incest, and protecting the life of the mother. The same position taken by Ronald Reagan. So I'm just asking you to give the victim here a few weeks. I mean, that's it. And potentially they wouldn't see a heartbeat until that time anyway. Also, I gotta say, I'm nervous. I'm shaking up here about this because I love the Louisiana Family Forum. I've got a great relationship with them. Louisiana Right to Life. My colleagues, Representative Hodges and Senator Milkovich, and I just ask you to give victims enough time to decide. And it may not even change the time frame at all, because if it is 10 weeks before you feel a heartbeat or can see it, then this wouldn't do anything to erode that legislation. So I just respectfully ask for you to consider this amendment. Thank you.
There are no questions on the amendment. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Representative Hodges, on your objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in objection to the amendment for the reasons stated before. That this handout that I passed out, I want you to look at the bottom. It's the Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals. I don't mean any disrespect to Representative Stokes, but you could find anything on the internet. And this is the Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals that says between week 8 and week 10 that you can detect a heartbeat. And so that's what this bill does. It is the heartbeat bill, as we've stated before. When you don't have a heartbeat, we know if any of us are not detected with a heartbeat that our life has ended. And so a heartbeat is proof that there is life. The person, the woman or the young lady can have an abortion up until that time that a heartbeat is detected, and I just ask that you would oppose this amendment.
Representative Marcel, is your question for Representative Hodges? Representative Hodges, will you take questions? She waives questions. Representative Stokes, to close on your amendment.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hodges, and everybody who's for this bill. I get it. I want to be 100% here, and I feel like I can support the bill if a victim just has that amount of time. If it's really 10 weeks, I just find a few too many references that only give people a week or two to come to terms with this. It could be a horrifying time in these people's lives. And I just ask that, and I also want to address, but I'm showing you that when you Google search it, that 5 references right there all say that it could be 5, 6, 7 weeks. And I just think that that's a lot to expect from a victim of a horrible event. Whatever you guys believe is right, I love y'all, and this pains me a lot. So just ask that you consider the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Stokes has offered an amendment to which Representative Hodges has objected. When the clerk opens the machines, all those in favor of the amendment vote yes. Those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Vote your machines, members. Representative Horton, no. Representative Amity, no. Representative Hodges, no. Representative Gwynn, no. Representative Jackson, no. Representative Richard, no. Representative Bagnaris, no. Representative Miguez, no. Are you through voting? Representative Smith, yes. Clerk will close the machine. 34 yeas, 67 nays. The amendment fails to pass. Next amendment, Madam Clerk. There are no other amendments. For a question on the bill, Representative Gary Carter. Representative Hodges.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to waive any more questions. I think this.
I'll be very.
Okay.
Okay. are you waiving or are you
Okay, yeah,
accepting?
okay, well, I'll take one more question.
Representative Gary Carter.
I'll be very brief. I have 3 quick questions, if I
Well,
can.
you said one.
Do you agree with me that the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution provides the people of this country the right of privacy?
Yes.
Do you agree with me that the 9th Amendment of the United States Constitution grant the people of this country the right of privacy?
Well, you want to read the 9th Amendment? Because I don't remember offhand what it is.
It's important that we understand what the Constitution says when we are involving ourselves in constitutional rights. Let me ask you this. Do you agree with the statement from the United States Supreme Court that this right of privacy, whether it be found in the 14th Amendment's concept of personal liberty and restrictions upon state action, or in the 9th Amendment's reservation of rights to the people, those rights of privacy is broad enough to encompass a woman's decision of whether or not to terminate her pregnancy? The right of privacy is constitutional. It is embedded at least twice in 2 separate amendments to the United States Constitution, no different than the rights of the Second Amendment. Those rights of privacy, these are delicate, sensitive matters for a woman to make in consultation with her doctor, herself, and whomever she determines. This right of privacy, regardless of whatever exceptions or amendments you come up with.
Representative Carter, just a minute. Representative Edmonds, why do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, I'm coming to an end.
Wait, let me get his question. Representative Edmonds.
Mr. Speaker, in the act of decorum, there's no question.
We're getting there. Representative Carter, ask a question, please.
I'm asking whether or not, how does she justify this legislation that takes away constitutional protection from women, and she doesn't even display a true knowledge of the Constitution?
Okay, I believe that the right to life is the greatest right there is. And I think the right to life supersedes every other right that we have.
And
every amendment, the right to life. Tell me what the first line of the Constitution says.
Ma'am, this is what you want to talk about you want to talk about the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
The right to life.
The right
is
of
in
life.
The first words of the Constitution.
And as we debate
that is the greatest right that we have.
And as we debate,
okay. Ask a question. Answer the question. I need to ask also the members
asked
of
and
the.
Answered.
I need to ask the members of the gallery and guests that are here to please refrain from response and applause while we're in debate. Representative Carter.
And I'm nearing a finish, Mr. Speaker, but during this
ask a question.
Is it not true that during the debate today that centered on life, people advertised the taking the life of rapists? So as we debate a bill that talks about life, isn't it true that there's been advocates talking about the death penalty?
For the unborn, what crime has the unborn committed? They have committed no crime. There is a penalty for rape, incest, and murder. Those are the people that we're talking about the death penalty for.
How do you balance that with the constitutional right of privacy found in at least two separate sections of the United States Constitution, the 14th Amendment as well as the 9th Amendment of the United States Constitution?
I believe that the preamble of the Constitution sets the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness as supreme over these other things. And so that the right to life is what we're talking about. We're talking about a heartbeat bill.
And you're taking away, if I'm not mistaken you, the right of those women to pursue happiness. You're taking away their right to make decisions with their doctor based upon their fundamental constitutional right of privacy. Who are you to tell women what they can and cannot do with their bodies? Mr. Speaker, I object to this language and to these men trying to make laws telling women what to do with their bodies. This is a constitutional...
That's not a question. That's not a question. Representative Hodges waives the remaining questions. For the floor in the bill, Representative LaBaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A lot of interesting testimony today.
I want to get back to basics. Life is precious. I had 2 of our pregnancies end in loss. We should try and keep life precious and make sure we do not participate in the murder of our infants before they're able to take care of themselves. And I support this bill wholeheartedly.
For the floor on the bill, Representative Morcell.
Members, once again, I rise in opposition of this bill, and I'm totally confused as to how people can come up here and talk about the right to life. When I ticked the bill the other day to eliminate the death penalty, the majority of this House was not in support of that bill, and that's life. And did you know that we have the highest rate of turnovers and exonerated people than any other state? Did you know? Which means that we are killing or attempting to kill some innocent people. So I guess the innocent baby is better than an innocent young man or woman. I rise in opposition of this bill and telling women what they can and cannot do with their bodies. You guys keep saying that Louisiana is a pro-life state, and you have the right to have that opinion. However, there are many of us who are pro-choice and pro-it's your business.
For the floor on the bill, Representative Seabaugh.
I rise in support of the bill, obviously, but I just want to come and clarify. Some people in this body apparently have a difficult time separating the difference between innocent life and guilty life. And what I said earlier about executing a rapist, I'm talking about somebody who's been convicted of a crime, not an innocent baby. If there's anybody in this body that really can't tell the difference between those two, then I'm going to pray for you, because that's a problem. We have a situation right now where we have an opportunity to pass a bill. This is a very good bill. I think it's been thoroughly debated. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but there is a vast difference between when you're talking about the death penalty and an innocent unborn baby. They're two completely different things. And finally, the last point I'll make is the whole woman's body, her right to choose. That's fine. You can do what you want with your body. But the body that is destroyed by an abortion is not the mother's. It's the baby's. And when does the baby have a right to stand up? And does this body have a right to stand up for the life of that unborn baby? Absolutely. In every way, shape, and form we do. Do we have a right to come in here and make laws that protect human life? Absolutely we do. It is not the mother's life that is destroyed by abortion. It is the baby. And we have a right, and we have an obligation, and with this bill, we have an opportunity to protect them. So please join me in supporting this bill.
For the floor on the bill, Representative Bacala.
Mr. Speaker, I call the question.
There were 2 other members for the floor, and Representative Bacala has called the question. Representative Hodges, you have a right to close on the bill.
Well, members, I just want to say thank you. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm pro-life, and I think most of you are too. This is pro-life legislation, with a pro-life legislature and a pro-life governor. So how do we determine whether someone is alive or not? Very simple answer. We listen for the heartbeat. And that's why we call this the heartbeat bill. And so if you can stop that heartbeat by an abortion, we know the baby is dead. So this heartbeat bill, that's all we're saying. If you can detect a heartbeat, give that baby a chance to live. And so I ask for your favorable passage. Thank you.
Representative Hodges moves final passage of the bill. As many in favor of final passage vote yes. Those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Vote your machines, members. Representative Ivy, yes. Representative Richard, yes. Representative Horton, yes. Are you through voting? Are you through voting? Clerk will close the machine. 79 yeas, 23 nays. The bill is finally passed. Representative Hodges moves to reconsider the vote. Bill finally passed and lay that motion on the table without objection. So ordered.